Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose on Amazon.com today. Daniel Penny, the white male Marine who was charged in the death of Jordan Neely, was found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide after a judge wound up throwing out the manslaughter charge against him on Friday.
This is breaking news from Pix 11.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Manarino in the Pix 11 newsroom, bringing you breaking news at this very hour, and that is Daniel Penny, the Marine veteran who fatally choked Jordan Neely, a homeless man on a subway train. The verdict just came down. He's been found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. That's just coming in minutes ago. The 12 jurors, 7 women and 5 men, returned to court this morning to deliberate on a lesser charge after the group could not reach a unanimous verdict on that top charge, which was the second-degree manslaughter. So prosecutors argued much of the case that Penny used too much force on Neely, but defense lawyers say that Penny was defending passengers after Neely became irate on that train last year. Penny put his arm around Neely's neck for about 6 minutes. His reaction fueled debate about race relations, not only locally but across the country, about that, public safety, approaches to the homelessness and mental illness that we are seeing on the streets. So again, just into the newsroom moments ago, Daniel Penny has been found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide in the subway chokehold death of Jordan Neely, which means he has been acquitted. Our James Ford is at the courtroom, and he will have much more throughout the day, both online at Pix11.com, Pix 11 Plus, and then tonight on Pix 11 News beginning at 4 p.m. For now, everybody, I'm Dan Manarino. We're going to get you back to regular scheduled programming.
Now, the jury in the trial of Daniel Penny, a white male Marine who was charged in the alleged death of Jordan Neely, a mentally disturbed homeless black man, came back to the judge saying that they were deadlocked as related to the charge of manslaughter in connection with the death of Jordan Neely. And what was quite disturbing to me as related to that whole case of the jury being deadlocked was that the judge decided to intervene and decided to dismiss the charge of manslaughter in connection with Daniel Penny as related to the death of Jordan Neely, and then told the jury to come back and try to figure out whether there was any sort of guilt as related to the charge of criminally negligent homicide in connection with the death of Jordan Neely by Daniel Penny. Now, the jury came back today on Monday afternoon with the whole charge of criminally negligent homicide and decided to say that Daniel Penny was not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. And this whole case, as related to the way the jury and the judge behaved, has me looking at them with a side eye, because this entire verdict in and of itself seems to be quite suspect in this city that's supposed to be so tolerant and so liberal, run by the Blue Party. Now, this whole case of Daniel Penny as related to the death of Jordan Neely, I basically believe that there was possibly a fix in from minute one due to the optics of the entire case and the optics of the entire case as related to the overall out-of-control crime that's been going on here in New York City ever since Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo basically implemented far-left policies such as bail reform and have allowed the city to run into complete chaos and allow the entire city to basically fall completely apart from the order that was established during the era of the Giuliani administration. And that's what basically led to everything coming to this violent altercation that took place in 2023, where a frustrated Jordan Neely, who was basically dealing with mental health problems for many years, came on that F train and participated in an episode where he talked about how he was frustrated about not having any food to eat or any sort of money to be able to take care of himself. And as he started to become more frustrated and angry in this episode, this is where he allegedly got aggressive, and got so aggressive to the point where he was scaring passengers. And this is where Daniel Penny basically he needed to go out and engage Jordan Neely in a chokehold, where he wound up leading to Jordan Neely possibly winding up passing away as the result of his actions. Now, I have been a New Yorker ever since I was born 51 years ago, and when I heard this story, it just basically showed me that maybe Daniel Penny was one of these guys who was possibly trying to play the white knight, as related to a situation I've seen transpire on a train for many years. And I've been riding the train ever since I was about 14 years old on my own, when I used to go to Park West High School, and I saw many homeless individuals having episodes like the one Jordan Neely was having. And usually the response from most New Yorkers, if you saw a person getting this aggressive, was most people would just get up out of their seats if this person was in their direction, and they would make no eye contact. And once that train wound up stopping, what people would do is basically get up off the train, leave the train car, disengage from that individual, and leave. And that would be the end of it as related to that episode. They would basically leave this person to go throw whatever tantrum that they were throwing and call it a day. That's what we would do here in New York ever since the days of about 1987, when I was riding the train when I was about 14 years old. People just learned, just leave these people to themselves and not get into it. However, Daniel Penny felt threatened by Jordan Neely. I guess he wasn't a seasoned New Yorker like myself, and since he wasn't a seasoned New Yorker, what he thought to do was engage Jordan Neely. And as he engaged Jordan Neely, he tried to bring this guy down, and as he brought him down, this is what led to Jordan Neely winding up going from having a mental health episode to a physical health episode. And this is what many in the black community believe led to the death of Jordan Neely, and led to the whole situation where the city was outraged to the point where they demanded that prosecutor Alvin Bragg bring charges against Daniel Penny, and bring these charges against Daniel Penny as related to the death of Jordan Neely. But when I looked at this whole case, I basically saw the outcome coming out of this case as related to legal precedent, as related to Daniel Penny getting off ever since they announced the charges. Because if you lived in New York as long as I have, you remember the case of Bernhard Goetz, who was on the train in 1984. Now, New York City back in 1984 had out-of-control crime just like it does today, due to crazy far-left policies established by Abe Beame and Ed Koch and the previous governors that came before them. And that created chaos in New York City, to the point where this chaos that was created by those far-left policies and the heroin epidemic, and the city just basically going to hell at that point. Bernhard Goetz was another white male riding the train, and as Bernhard Goetz rode the train, this is what happened in the case of Bernhard Goetz. He ran into some guys. One of them did come from my old neighborhood where I used to live, and basically ran into these 4 black males. And what happened in that case was Bernhard Goetz pulled out a firearm, wound up shooting all of those individuals. And sadly, what happened in the case of Bernhard Goetz, just like in the case of Jordan Neely, was many people weren't sympathetic towards the black male victims. No, what they saw them were as perpetrators, and instead what they were sympathetic towards the shooter, Bernhard Goetz, because many New Yorkers were frustrated about the crime being out of control in the city, and they were frustrated about the crime being so out of control in the city, they basically turned Bernhard Goetz into a national hero, and turned him into a national hero because of the just whole dysfunctional situation here in the state of New York, where everything was complete chaos. And the same thing happened here in the case of Daniel Penny as related to Jordan Neely. People turned Daniel Penny into a hero, and as they turned him into a hero, what happened was he basically wound up becoming a poster boy for all of the chaos going on here in New York City, in that they wanted to make him look like some sort of good Samaritan. However, when I looked at Daniel Penny, I just see another one of these beta male white knights, one of these beta male white knights who thought he needed to intervene in a situation that basically goes on trains here every day in New York City as related to our homeless population, a homeless population that many of our New York politicians willfully and intentionally have neglected for years as related to their benign neglect, as I see it. I mean, you got a black mayor like Eric Adams who basically went out here and made migrants who entered the country illegally a priority over people like Jordan Neely, who had serious mental health issues for years. And as related to the whole argument of Jordan Neely as he was making as related to his situation, this young mentally ill man could not get any sort of help or support like many homeless individuals here in New York who are black can't get much support. But no, people who entered the country illegally who got off buses at the Port Authority bus station, they could basically get a handshake from the mayor and get free clothes, free food, free cell phones, free everything overall. And Jordan Neely could get nothing at all as related to services, and this man's name was in their records for years as being mentally ill. That's where I believe the real crime is as related to this whole situation. That's where I believe the real crime is as related to this overall situation, was the now racism that went on with the New York City Department of Homeless Services and the New York City government. I mean, here you have a predominantly black city council and minority city council, a black mayor, and black people who are homeless can't get tangible services, but people who got off buses and that were shipped here from Texas, basically they could get everything as related to care. And that just shows how racist the entire system of services here are in blue leftist New York City. It just shows how racist the entire system is as related to New York City, that many of these people who have mental health problems like Jordan Neely can't get support for services. I mean, this man can't get support for services as related to things. I mean, a migrant who enters the country illegally could get all sorts of money. I mean, Eric Adams was giving out debit cards to migrants who entered the country illegally, but someone like Jordan Neely couldn't even get support to get his SSI, which he is entitled to as related to his mental health, and or get mental health services or medication. And that's where I have a real bone to pick with the people in New York City government who failed Jordan Neely. And I'm going to get into Daniel Penny and his white privilege in a minute, but the whole thing is that this young man basically wound up becoming a man in crisis, mainly because people in the city wound up failing him, and even his family basically couldn't really get much help for him because of the policies that were in place. And that's what led to this young man winding up in and out of jail so many times, because what happens as related to mental health in this country is that we basically have destroyed mental health when Ronald Reagan closed all the mental health facilities, and people basically have to go to the prison system to get mental health services. So Jordan Neely wouldn't have been on that train had the city had adequate services to care for him in the New York City Department of Homeless Services, which didn't make him a priority. Had there been actual efforts to make care for him instead of virtue signaling to try to get jobs from the Biden administration, from Eric Adams and many of the members of the city council, had there been that would have been able to help Jordan Neely, and he wouldn't have been on that train had there been some sort of care for them. But they don't really care about most of the homeless population, because most of the homeless population is black. And because the homeless population is black. This is where we see the institutional racism from the city of New York as related to things. And that's basically what led to the whole situation with Jordan Neely being on that train. And that's the thing that burns me up, because had they actually did their job, Jordan Neely wouldn't have been on that train to be confronted by Daniel Penny, who in my eyes basically was one of these beta males who wanted to go out here and play the role of white knight, wanted to go out here and play the role of white knight, and go out here and try to be a hero as related to a situation where there didn't need to be a hero. No, what was happening here as related to that episode that Jordan Neely was participating in was you had a guy who was basically desperate. He wanted to get some food to eat, as was claimed, and wanted to get some help, but sadly he got no help. All he got was attacked, and got attacked by a guy who really didn't understand how life goes here in New York City, trying to be a hero where we did not need a hero, and was made out to be a hero for a situation where you needed to be a bit more patient and understanding regarding the struggles of people like Jordan Neely who have mental health issues. I mean, when I look at this whole situation, Daniel Penny really wasn't a hero in my eyes, the same way Bernhard Goetz really wasn't a hero back in 1984. No, Bernhard Goetz was not a hero, but he was made out to be a hero by a frustrated population who was frustrated about the incompetence of the politicians to do something about the crime that had basically exploded in New York City from the late 1960s as heroin became popular into the 1970s and 1980s as the city dealt with a fiscal crisis, which led to the layoff of law enforcement and basically led to the entire city winding up falling completely apart due to the incompetent leadership of the Blue Party. And Bernhard Goetz basically became a hero to people because he was willing to take the law in his own hands, and took the law in his own hands because the entire legal system had fallen completely apart due to far left policies. And the same thing happened here in New York as related to Daniel Penny. The entire populace of New York is frustrated due to the complete incompetence of Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams as related to running New York City, and the state legislature and the city council as related to them passing dysfunctional far-left policies like bail reform, which let people like Jordan Neely fall through the cracks because as they give them slaps on the wrist for an escalation of crimes, what happens is that the city people who are citizens who are paying taxes get frustrated, and instead of having sympathy to help someone like Jordan Neely, what they do is see him as somebody who is a threat to them, and believe that someone like Daniel Penny is a hero, believe that Daniel Penny is a hero as related to his behavior, but in actuality he really wasn't a hero at all, because again, this man was not putting hands on anyone, because that's usually what people do in the case of homeless people here in New York. If they're not putting hands on anybody, if they're not really putting a hand on someone, what people do is just they walk away from that individual because they understand, okay, this person's having an episode, and the best thing to do is get off the train, preserve your safety, and once you preserve your safety, you let law enforcement deal with that individual, and deal with that individual in this situation where they basically, again, will possibly either remove this person from the subway system, and they'll possibly find a way to sneak back in and call it a day at that. But Daniel Penny wanted to come in like Bernhard Goetz because he was possibly hearing all these horror stories about New York, and basically as he tried to put the cape on and be a hero and be the white knight, he wound up showing how tarnished he was as related to this situation. And sadly what happened is the white media turned him into a hero, especially the alternative media and mainstream media. They made him into some sort of hero and made him into a hero like Bernhard Goetz. And this is where white supremacy stepped in and basically gave us the verdict that we got. Now, the white supremacists basically wanted to rig the game for the case of Daniel Penny, just like they did with Kyle Rittenhouse, where they wanted, after spinning the narrative that he was the hero, what they wanted to do was go out here and they wanted to get rid of the manslaughter charge. So the jury, after the jury deadlocked, they could have just said, okay, go back and continue to deliberate. Go back and continue to deliberate as related to that charge of manslaughter. That's what judges usually do. However, the judge in this case, I believe, decided to fix this case because of the optics and bad publicity that would have went on. So what they did was go out here and look to dismiss this charge. Now, this is, again, not outside of legal precedent. This is just basically the judge arbitrarily deciding to dismiss a charge. And then after dismissing the charge, this is where the judge decided to tell the jury to go back on the charge of criminally negligent homicide. And after they went back on the charge of criminally negligent homicide, this is where the jury decided, okay, we'll go on this charge that we know doesn't really fit the criteria as related to this case, and go out here and say, okay, this charge isn't one that fits the case, and this is the way they allowed Daniel Penny to go free in the case of the death of Jordan Neely, and decided to let him go basically because they were white, and they say so because that judge making that dismissal of that charge is basically the judge invoking his white privilege to give another white male white privilege in the death of a black male. A black male they thought had no value as related to his life, because why should we destroy the life of a white male who was a former member of the military who served his country? Why should we destroy his life for the life of a mentally disturbed black man? That's basically what's presented here as related to this whole case, and it really shows how little value a black man's life has in this whole blue state, where people are supposed to be so tolerant and accepting that they participate in the same anti-black racism that many people accuse those in red states. And what this is part of another disturbing trend that we're seeing with these blue states. I mean, the blue states that basically convicted Bill Cosby of a crime he did not commit by an overzealous prosecutor. Blue states that have gone out here and again participated in the same anti-black racism. And this is where we start to see again the racism of the state of New York. That's no different than what happened in 1984 as related to the case of Bernhard Goetz, a case that basically just shows us the legal precedent of white supremacy in this blue state as related to the case of the death of Jordan Neely, and how nothing has really changed in 40 years as related to the state of New York as related to black men and our rights in this country. That's what really is troubling here, and that's troubling because you had a black mayor, you had a black district attorney in Alvin Bragg, you had a black city council. Again, all these black people in places of political power, but they could do nothing to help a black man like Jordan Neely. And basically, this white male has gotten a pass, even though you have black politicians in place as related to this trial, which I basically believe was a farce from when it won. Basically a farce and a theater just basically meant to pacify people so that they would not riot in the streets like they did in the case of George Floyd. Basically, this whole trial was an empty symbolic exercise, that was just meant to, again, pacify the masses for a moment, because I already knew what the verdict was going to be as someone, again, who has lived in New York for 51 years, and as someone who saw the case of Bernhard Goetz, I already knew that Daniel Penny was going to walk from minute one, because nobody's going to go out here and take a white male who is a former member of our military, a guy who basically was on a train, who they believed was a hero in their eyes, and go out here and put that man in jail for the life of a black man. No, that wasn't going to happen here in white supremacist America at all. No, what was going to happen was they were going to go through the motions, participate in this judicial theater, and after they participated in this judicial theater, what was going to happen was this man was going to be acquitted in the death of Jordan Neely. And what will happen with black people is that they'll continue maintaining the same codependent relationship that they have here in Blue, New York, instead of looking to go out here and demand better services for those who have mental health issues and demand better services for those who have mental health issues as related to being black, because most black people basically, again, here in New York, they're very apathetic as related to this whole situation, and sadly, they're not going to do anything about it. And that's the sad part about this, because again, foundational black Americans, the only people who are going to look out for us is us. And sadly, nobody was looking out for Jordan Neely. No, most of us didn't understand about people with mental health issues. Now, I had a late sister who was handicapped, and I would have never left her to the streets like they did Jordan Neely. That's where I also have a bone to pick with his family, because I have a who passed away. I mean, she passed away in 2020, but our family, we always looked out for her to make sure that she was safe. We always made sure that she was all right. And what's sad is that with Jordan Neely, the family didn't understand that when it comes to black children with mental health issues, you gotta look out for them. You gotta look out for them, because the system of white supremacy will prey on those children. The system of white supremacy will prey on them just because they are black, and they won't care about this person having any sort of issues. They will make them a target, and they will go out here and look to weaponize things against them. That's why you have to be vigilant and look out for those people in your family who have mental health issues. You have to look out for those people, because the whole thing is that the system of white supremacy is so evil that they don't care who loses their life, if they're black, because black people are human beings, and they don't care what condition you have if you are black, because I've heard so many other horror stories about mentally disabled people winding up in situations where they basically wind up dead at the hands of the police, as they have episodes. And sadly, this is why you have to be go the extra mile and look out for black people who are having mental health issues, because the last thing you want to do is have them run into one of these white knights like Daniel Penny, who wants to believe he's a hero, but he's no hero as related to this story. No, he's another one of these beta male nice guys who basically wanted to participate in a covert contract where he thought he could be the hero, but white supremacy wanted to spin a narrative after Jordan Neely wound up dying to make him a hero. A hero in a case of something that goes on every day on trains here in New York City, and that everybody deals with. And the whole thing is, this whole situation could have been dealt with had New York City's Department of Homeless Services actually had been able to do their jobs, instead of virtue signaling to go out here and help out migrants. Had they been able to go out here and do their job, Jordan Neely would be alive today, and possibly could have been someplace where he could have been cared for as related to either a mental health facility with his SSI money, and could have been taken care of as related to this situation. But sadly, there's a lot of blame to go around, and there are no heroes as related to Jordan Neely. No, there are no heroes at all. No, but the ultimate villain is Daniel Penny, and don't let anybody in white supremacy tell you that this guy is a hero at all, because there was no need to take this guy down. All you needed to do was walk away and let professionals go out here and do their job. We don't need people to go out here and be vigilantes. We don't need people to be heroes. No, that's a sign that your entire society is breaking down, because guys like Daniel Penny don't need to be heroes when there's competent law enforcement and competent mental health services. If there's competent people running around, there's no need for anyone to be a hero and look to save someone by doing more harm to them, because they don't have the adequate training to understand how to read a situation or read a person who's basically in distress. Now, if you want to support the channel, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct Imprint, you can find them in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can find them all at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks in a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business at paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.